It's 7 o'clock. Marvin's going to share with us for just a few minutes. And again, this is kind of a new situation. So Marvin, why don't you speak to us just for a couple minutes, share your heart and kind of where we're at.
Thanks. Hey, by the way, on that marooning question, I would rather be by myself and be with Joe too. So I'm hoping he voted for me. But anyway, just good morning. And we decided, listen, even though we're in the middle of this viral season, whatever this is, we decided to forge ahead to be together when we're apart. And so we're going to do this, and we're going to figure out how to make this happen. We're going to figure out how to be creative when it comes to coming together. We might be practicing physical separation and physical distancing, but definitely not social distancing. We're going to keep figuring this out and connect together. And I want to remind you, just like we usually do, you are the gift of God to our cities and our communities, and you're the precious gift. And so our intent, City Ministry Network, through this time is to help you, to help all of us to come out of this season stronger than when we entered it. And the question I ask myself every day, and I'm going to ask you as well, is will you come out of it stronger? You know, this season we find ourselves, the season that we find ourselves in is forcing us to reimagine how to maintain a sense of kinship at a moment when in-person gatherings are greatly discouraged. And we're all learning new lessons and empathy for our fellow people and the communities that they belong to. Viktor Frankl, writing from the madness of the Holocaust, remind us that we don't get to choose our difficulties, but we do have the freedom to select our responses. Let me say that to you again. He reminds us that we don't get to choose our difficulties, but we do have the freedom to select our responses. And the work we offer in times of crisis, the love that we give, and our ability to display courage in the face of suffering. Author David Brooks opined that the plague today is an invisible monster, but it gives birth to a better world. And then he writes, you see, it's during economic and social depressions that the great organizations of the future are spurned. And he also observes that right now in this season, there's a shift of values coming to the world. We're being forced to be intentional about keeping our human connections. There's a new action coming into the world. And the young leaders that I've been interacting with over the last couple of weeks have really one question on their minds. What can I do right now is what they're asking. What can we do? What can I do? How can I invest and take action? So there's a shift in values coming. There's a new action that's coming. And we're discovering that there's a new introspection that's coming into the world. People right now seem to be eager to have deeper conversations about life and meaning. And isn't it true that unexpected obstacles and problems always bring those things to us? And this morning, we want to offer you some ways in which some are looking for opportunity in the midst of this unexpected obstacle. Leaders, the best leaders, the great leaders, find paths where others only see obstacles. And I want to remind you, 11 months ago, we invited Todd Bolsinger to be with us. He's the author of Canoeing the Mountains. And he tells us the story of Lewis and Clark, who left St. Louis by the request of President Thomas Jefferson to take the Missouri River and find a way to connect with the Columbia River in Washington State. And they grabbed their canoes and started down the rivers. And lo and behold, they met an obstacle, the mighty Rocky Mountains. And their canoes could not get them over the mountains. They had to find new ways, forge new paths, find new paths to find a way to get through that obstacle. And I want to say to you that that might be where we are today. The things that got us to where we are today ain't going to get us over those mountains and get us into the future. And so I want to encourage us to take this time to be learning, to be thinking, to be paying attention about new ways and learning new things. I spent last weekend figuring out how to use Zoom and all these things on the technology that either I've been too busy or distracted to even learn. And so take this season to reflect, take this season to learn new things, take this season to connect with people in ways that maybe you never have done or are uncomfortable. It's amazing how I just text somebody and say, hey, I'm thinking about you and I'm praying for you or love you or I'm proud of you or thanks for your work, and how uplifting that's been to so many people. So I want to encourage you to do that, to take this time to reflect and to ponder all that's happening. So back in May, we had Todd come, And I want to let you know, we had, in fact, this morning, we were going to have Reggie McNeil, who is an author and a futurist, and we'd invited him to come this morning to spend all day with us in different groups of people to talk about the future. And how do we get over the Rocky Mountains that we're facing, at least the Rocky Mountains we thought we were facing last August when we booked him. And so we penciled him in for July, we penciled him in for December, because we just don't know what the future is going to bring. But when we get through this, and we will get through this because history tells us we're going to get through this, guess what? We're going to have somebody come in, not to tell us how to discern the future, but to get a chance for our own communities to shape where we're going next to the best of our abilities. So I want to thank you for you being here this morning, for being our beta group. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Mike, but let's get on with this thing. And we're going to come out of this stronger, and we're going to come out of this as a better community, more loving, more giving, because that's who Modesto, that's who Stanislaus County is, a humble county with the gift of giving. So, and so many of you are already showing it. So I'll come back in a little bit, but Mike, go for it.
Thanks, Marvin. So again, we find ourselves in a different world than we were a month ago. And that's really why we decided to kind of take a change on the topic. We had a year ago had a catalyst that really focused on the housing crisis. And there was great energy and great response from that. And many of us really haven't known what has come out of that. And there's been some really incredible things that have come out. And so we had planned to actually share some of that today. And because of where we're at, we decided to take a change. We're going to push that back a month and maybe two. We'll see kind of as this month goes by. But we're in a season that we're being told to isolate. And so we decided today that we're going to kind of address this. Many of you are already kind of coping and figuring out how to deal with isolation. But we wanted to share just a couple of stories from people who are learning how to stay connected during isolation. And so I've asked a few people to share. I'm going to ask, first of all, Aaron Crumrine. Aaron, go ahead and unmute yourself. And then Aaron's going to kind of share from his perspective. Would you tell us who you are, and then kind of just share with us about this, your concerns about this whole isolation issue?
So I'm Aaron, and I work in a variety of areas, but one of the main areas that I work in is mental health. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and work in that, have a private practice, but also come alongside a lot of different agencies and places and lend that area of expertise as well. And for me, and within mental health, this is a major concern. We hear about the concerns about our physical health and what this virus could potentially do for us physically. But as we look at the state where we have to keep this social distancing, there becomes a concern for our mental health as well. Because we are designed to be connected to people, designed to be connected with one another. From the very moment we are born, we begin social interaction. It's extremely important for that face-to-face contact. An infant immediately begins to recognize and look for the face for them to find comfort, to find safety, all of those kinds of things. And so it's vitally important that we stay socially connected. And in this time, the phrase that I keep repeating over and over is social distancing is not the same as social isolation. And so it's finding those ways for us to maintain our social interactions, our social connections with one another. And I am constantly encouraging, find ways to do that as close to face-to-face as we healthily can, with wise boundaries and parameters and those kinds of things. And so texting's great, but texting is information. Hearing a voice, when you hear the voice, you can hear the inflections. You can hear if somebody is nervous or scared, or if somebody is calm. And so hearing a voice is better than just getting the information from a text. And also, again, we start from infancy, from the moment we're born, needing to see that face. Facial recognition is so important just to us as human beings. And that's where technology today often gets a bad rap, but this becomes a very vital thing. I have a number of clients that have been able to, by video, come in and go, man, I just needed to see another face, kind of a thing. And so using our technology to get that connection as close as we can to being able to see one another. There's a lot of encouraging things that I'm seeing. Several years ago, a friend of mine gave me an article that talked about the decline of socialization within our culture and our society. It said that air conditioning killed our culture because with the invention and onset of the air conditioner, everybody moved inside. We no longer sat on our front porches and no longer carried on conversations with our neighbors. And it's really encouraging to me to see, even in my own neighborhood, as we're out and about, walking the sidewalks, keeping our distance, but the social interaction that we're beginning to have with our neighbors. I think there's an encouraging side in this as well. And so for me, it's recognizing that in this time, our social connection is a huge factor in us maintaining our mental health as well. Mike?
Thanks, Aaron. You can go ahead and remute yourself then. So thanks for sharing the importance that, dealing with the issue of mental health. And this is not just a physical health issue. So Leah, why don't you introduce yourself and then tell us why or what you found with this whole idea of isolation.
Okay, so my name is Leah Ashford, and I was in HR at Gallo for 20 years. And now I have a life coaching company that I do from home. And it's funny hearing, Aaron, what you have to say, because I've actually proved that true in the last 2 weeks as I've kind of been dealing with this. So I live on my own and I usually work from home. And normally it's not a problem for me, even though I'm extroverted, because I get out for meetings and events and church and, all sorts of different things, getting together with friends. But that first week was really hard for me, being on my own, and I canceled different meetings because we're not supposed to get together. But I finally had a meeting with someone that we're supposed to work on a project, and I'm like, we really can't cancel this. And I remembered that I have a Zoom account that I use for online coaching long distance, but I don't usually use it for local. And I said, why don't we meet on there? And just seeing her face and talking directly and laughing, and all of a sudden I did not feel as alone. And realizing how much of a difference that made, then the next day I was supposed to have a lunch meeting with somebody. And rather than cancel it, I said, let's just do lunch on Zoom. And so we each made our own lunches. And we got together and we sat there and we ate, looking at each other, on Zoom, and talked about the things we normally talk about at lunch, just books and catching up and seeing how each other's families are doing. And you felt that absolute connection. And so I started, even though I was usually calling my mom to check in, I started FaceTiming with her, and it was so much better just to see her face. And so I would encourage you guys to find ways to do that if you are alone, if you're not getting enough interaction, if you're more isolated, to find ways to connect with people using technology to meet online. And so other ways we've done it, recently had a birthday party with someone online. We actually had a dance off for my friend Linda Duran, with everybody's families got on and everybody did a dance, and you could see their family unit in their little square. And some people were flicking their lights on and off, to create a disco effect, and you had the whole thing going on. So there's so many different things you can do. And this week I had a coffee breakfast get together with some of my home group women, and we all sat there with our cups of coffee and our PJs, and we all just caught up. And so I would tell you, if you're somebody who normally goes golfing with your friends, get them together on a platform where you can see each other and catch up, and maybe watch each other practice your golf swing in your backyard. You could do that online. I know my father-in-law used to get together with a group of guys at McDonald's to have coffee once or twice a week. You could now do that online. So lots of different things you could do. And also, if maybe you're not as technologically savvy, City Ministry Network, we've decided to make ourselves available. And if you'd like somebody to help teach you how to use Zoom or some of these other platforms, just email us and we'll connect you with somebody to help you figure it out or help you know where to find all the tutorials that Marvin watched this last weekend, so you know how to do that. And then I would also recommend that also face-to-face, finding ways to do that as Erin was doing in real life. So I had checked on a couple of my neighbors early on, but I noticed that across kind of a busy street, but across the street, I hadn't seen a husband and wife that are neighbors of me out in their yard at all. And so I thought I should go check on them. And so found a time to run across the street, knock on the door, then stood back on the porch. And she came to the door and didn't come out, but she was so glad that I came to check in because she had been laid off and her husband's still working, but she's home by herself all the time. And she was just so glad to see a person. And so we stood there, social distance, but stood there on the porch for like 30 minutes, just talking and catching up. And the other thing I've heard is that people who used to, on nice days, go sit in your backyard and enjoy the sun are now going to sit in their front yard or sit on your front porch. And that way, as people walk by, walk the dog or whatever, you can have that conversation face to face with your neighbors. And so recommend that you find ways to do that. And whether it's FaceTime or Zoom, or there's other things out there, there's Google Hangout, there's Microsoft Teams, WebEx, GoToMeeting. I think WhatsApp might have something you can use. So lots of different things out there and ways. Get creative and find ways to get connected and see people face to face. That's my recommendation. It made it to where last week I had quite a few meetings on a Wednesday and a Thursday and FaceTime things that finally by the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to disconnect. I'm ready to have some time to myself again. And I would also recommend that for those of you who are still working and are doing a lot of Zoom meetings and feel like that's all you're doing is you're in them, all the time, is to find ways to shut it off at the end of the day, take a break, take a rest, make sure you have time for that. And I would also recommend that you recommend to the people you work with that maybe meetings end 10 minutes before the hour so that you have time to go to the bathroom. I've heard some people haven't had time between meetings to actually even get up and, check your email or check in on your family, whatever it might be. So give yourself space. And I'd also say that if you find you're feeling lots of different emotions during this time, that's okay too. I think everybody is. And just to be kind to yourself and take the time you need to also take care of yourself and take care of people around you. So that's it from me, Mike.
Thanks, Leah.
Yep.
Maria Cortez, I'm not seeing you on the screen, but I know you're here. Why don't you unmute and share your experience? So a little bit different than Leah's, but share who you are, first of all, introduce yourself, and then your experience with this idea of virtual connection.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Cortez, and I'm with an organization called AbleWorks, and we equip students and young moms with financial education and life skills. So I'm going to share a little bit about just our perspective on how we had to pivot as an organization during this time. And so what's interesting is all of our programming was based out of the school setting. So cohort meetings, in class with students, our cohort gatherings with college students, they were all typically based in a school setting. So as you can imagine, we've had to move everything. So the first thing that we've had to do as an organization is we really had to pivot our programming and the focus and delivery to support the needs of our participants and the current reality. And so a couple of things that we realized very quickly by surveying is that there was a huge need for human connection. And so even though there wasn't a physical place or we couldn't meet face to face, we knew we had to get creative. And so to piggyback on what Leah was saying, and so getting creative on ways to replicate in-person experiences in a virtual setting. And so things like for our women's cohort, which would typically meet at a school site, we moved everything virtual. And the response that we've got has been incredible. So people still want to connect. They still want to hang out and talk with the other ladies in the cohort. There's a greater need right now. So they need help navigating some of the resources. They need help navigating Zoom. So the first meeting we actually had with them was to walk them through how to use Zoom, how to connect, and even exploring other connecting opportunities. So it was a real like how-to, because again, this is the new reality we're in. For our college, for our cohort for first generation college students, similarly, they wanted that connection. So we're figuring out how to create the same experience for them. But so not only just meeting together virtually, but even how to be creative. So a couple of things that we've come up with, just creative ideas to keep them connected, and some fun experiences. For the women, we have a Zumba class with them every Saturday. So that's been really cool to have them come in and just laugh and have fun and work out together, stay connected. For our college students, so they actually this week had an outing that was scheduled. And so rather than just saying, hey, because of social distancing, we're just going to have to cancel, we're going to do a virtual museum tour together. So just figuring out how to creatively replicate what you would have done in person into a virtual setting. So really looking through that lens. And so the other thing we realize is, again, people really want some human connection, but they also just want to navigate through this together. So there was a huge sense of loneliness. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do in certain situations. And so just having the opportunity to journey with others and kind of work together on these things, and us providing that platform and support, it's being received really, really well. And then as an organization, a couple of things that we've had to do. I mean, we've had to really just pivot to the current reality. And so when it came to programming, in some cases, the existing kind of lineup or programming we had, it's not fitting to the current reality. So we needed to adjust and figure out where do our participants need the support now. So things like navigating resources, so even these last couple of weeks, it's looked like helping people apply for unemployment, directing them into services where they can receive food. It's giving information around what we know around the stimulus package. So our programming has had to, in some ways, pause and address the current reality. And then as an organization, I think we've all had to shift from this is kind of my department and this is my program, this is my area of focus, to all hands on deck. And so really coming together to support our participants and really meet the immediate needs of our participants, and being open to being creative and it looking differently to create a good experience for them. And then I know, Leah, you mentioned this too. So there's days where we have 5 to 6 Zoom meetings a day. And so there's a lot of check-ins. But what we found really helpful is to change some of the formatting. So every morning we've moved to a quick 15 to 20 minute check-in, which is just a, how are you doing? No programming, no agenda, just an opportunity for people to share. And that's been a really good touch point for our team. And we find, again, even though it feels like there's a ton of Zoom meetings, there's nothing like having some face-to-face time. And so encouraging, everyone to over-communicate during this time. And so even though, we are connected a lot more, there's nothing like being able to see someone's face. So leveraging the platforms that we have in front of us, Zoom, Google Hangouts, chat features, text, whatever is easiest, just leverage it to stay connected and to stay plugged in. The last thing I'll say is that, as we're practicing social distancing, I think it's important for us to engage in creative connections so that bring us together virtually. So I would encourage all of us to just always be thinking about how to really still have those creative connections that can still bring us together. It's just going to look differently.
Thanks, Maria. So I've asked one other person to share this morning, and Dave is somebody who has come. He is not local here, but has come the past couple of years and shared with us. And for those who have heard him share, it has just been incredible stuff. But Dave does a lot of distance virtual connecting. And then he works for an organization that does that incredibly well. And so, Dave, would you just take a few minutes and kind of share what you've learned, a little bit of your experience? Just share with us on the importance of staying connected in a time when we can't physically connect.
Good morning, Catalyst. Thanks, Mike. It's a joy to be with y'all again. I work for an organization called the Global Leadership Network, and we host the Global Leadership Summit all over the world. So there's about 1,300 cities where we have the summit every year. Just last night, we had a coaching gathering with folks from Southeast Asia. And so we found ourselves, I was moderating a chat room with that, where it was the colleagues that I was working with were from Canada, Hong Kong, Singapore. So the whole point was to use technology to make the world smaller and to notice people as individuals, regardless of the country that they're in, regardless of the physical proximity that they have to one another. And what's interesting is we're taking that technology now and we're doing that at the city level, just like Catalyst is doing this morning. My heart sings when I hear of instances when gatherings like Catalyst are not canceled, but instead just the location moves, and the location has moved digitally. And I really want to applaud that and thank you for your courage this morning to show up at Catalyst. I'm a pastor by trade, and an extrovert. And so as people arrive at church, I had the opportunity to connect with them, to see them, to check in on them, to notice them as individuals. When I switched to the role that I'm in now, I serve churches, businesses, nonprofits from Omaha to Hawaii, from Alaska to Vegas. And so it's this very large geographic expanse where I needed to pivot and figure out, how do I maintain relational connection with people that I only might see once a year or once every other year? And really, when you think about that, we're in a similar situation now. How do I maintain my relationships, even though I don't see people with physical proximity? And at the end of the day, we actually all know how to do this pretty well. From the standpoint of, we all know that relationships are built around intentionality. And so taking intentional moments in this season may look a little different right now, but we actually already have the strength and the know-how in terms of the foundation in order to embrace those relationships that much more. So just a couple of tips that are not unlike Aaron and Maria and Leah, who have already shared, but I've learned to when people come to mind, I'll simply send them a text or send them an email right then and say, hey, you just came to mind. I'm a man of faith, and so you just came to mind, and so I'm pausing right now to pray for you. It might be that I'm walking through an airport, not in this season, but this is one of the things I've learned to do, and I'll see a gate with a city, and I know somebody in that city, so I'll actually take a picture of the gate with the city name and say, hey, thinking of you right now. A friend of mine in Folsom, California, a pastor, and I share an affinity for loose leaf tea. And so when I make my loose leaf tea in the morning, and while it's steeping, I'll pray for Brad. And then I just recently popped him a text and said, hey, praying for you right now as I sip my tea. Another idea that you might consider is we may follow up with one another. If one of your practices is prayer, and say, hey, I will pray for you. I've tried to get into the habit through my life of actually pausing to pray for someone right then and there rather than doing it in the future. And I found that this is possible via text and via email as well, where you can actually type out some kind of a prayer or a great thought to someone and send it along their way. It is important. One of the things that we've learned through working together across the world and across the country is that there's a difference in types of conversations. And it's important to realize that as we leverage technology. There are 2D and 3D conversations. So 2D conversations are great for information sharing or setting up a meeting or letting people know that we're thinking of them. So that's your text and email. There's words on a page, words on a screen. 3D conversations actually bring a little bit more holistic communication pattern into them. So nonverbal communication, for example. So 3D, it's important to recognize that in this season, when we have challenging conversations, because those still are going to happen even in this season, it's important to leverage 3D tools when we're having those conversations. So use the phone, use meeting spaces like this. A very sharp 20-something leader that I learned from shared with me that communication, as we have heard before, is 70% nonverbal. So the closer you can get to a physical presence, the more effective your communication will be. So if you're needing to push back or share a hard truth or talk about something that may be a little bit more challenging, be sure to rely on 3D tools that maximize nonverbal communication. Is video conferencing frustrating? It sure can be, right? It takes a little while when we find ourselves, I forgot to unmute myself or something along those lines, or it takes a little while to connect or we get pixelated or whatever. Just this past week, our small group went online rather than meeting in person. And so it took us the first 15 minutes to get everybody set up and ready to go. And the group leader texted me afterward and said, "I'm so sorry it took so long." And I said, "This was fantastic." And the reason is it was a shared experience that actually enriched our connection together as we shared laughs together, trying to make it so that we could see and hear one another. I've actually found that meeting people for the first time in an environment like this can sometimes accelerate that initial gathering, initial interaction, simply because we get to laugh about the stumbling block that technology can be at times. Couple of tips from our team that connects across the country and across the world. I'm part of a team that meets physically together maybe about 4 times a year. But we have a weekly video meeting because we're across the country, and we've learned a couple of things. One is if the meeting, just like today, starts at 7 a.m., arrive a couple minutes early. And there is that initial banter that happens in a meeting that actually happened here at Catalyst as well. Enjoy and savor those few minutes before the meeting gets started. There can be lag time technologically if somebody is speaking and somebody else wants to respond. And to make sure that everybody's heard, our team has relied on what we learned at kindergarten. We raise our hands. And when we raise our hands, it actually shows that we have something to share. And what's funny is we actually do that when we're physically present as well, as we just out of habit raise our hands in the middle of a meeting if we have something to say. I'm going to leave you with this, that my wife's best friend lives on the other side of the country to her, and they're really good at maintaining a long distance relationship together with text and call and read books together. And they are probably on their 500th game of Words with Friends on via text. But 2 days ago, her best friend's daughter, who's 4 years old, broke her leg. Now, mind you, Karen and Annie are really good at this technology thing. But just last night, Karen shared with me that actually they got better at it as a result of the social distancing lately. Because here's this 4-year-old in a cast who mom is needing to tend to on a regular basis. And Karen initially would have said, "I wish I was there. This is one of those moments where I wish we lived in the same city." But instead of saying that, because there is creative solution right now because of the social distancing environment, instead Karen let Annie know, "Hey, I'd love to read to your daughter for an hour, where she can curl up with a teddy bear and we'll connect via FaceTime or Zoom, and I'll spend an hour reading to her, and you can actually go get a shower or go have a little moment to yourself." And she wouldn't have said that if it weren't for the social distancing that predisposes us to think creatively about expanding our relationships. So my invitation to you this morning, Catalyst, is how will you not just maintain your relationships, but how will you actually grow your relationships in this season of social distancing?
Marvin, you want to share some of your closing thoughts and then pray for us?
You know, it was interesting. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think Dave mentioned earlier about us meeting together, and I didn't realize how precious this 60 minutes was to me. And to say we're not going to let this obstacle this season block us from meeting together, we're going to figure this out, and just to hear all the voices and to say, man, we're all in this together. Even though at times that can sound like a cliche, the truth of it is that to be in the same room, to skim the chats and to see, you know, everybody in the room has been amazing to me over the, I love studying leadership anyway, but over the last couple of weeks, where I've really been focusing is on leadership in challenging times, leadership in turbulent times. And my strength finders, I am strong when it comes to two pieces of history and context, which means I love looking at history and then applying it to the present and the future. And Winston Churchill once said that the farther you can look into the past is the farther you can look into the future. And in history, we've faced these things before. We've been here before as a society, as a human race. And so where in history has a society or a generation faced, and how did they respond and what did they do? I've been reading quite a bit of different things and skimming different things. Author Carrie Newhoff gave me some real ideas that I just want to let you know about today that I've been working on, not only in my own life, but with our team to bring perspective. But he says a few things. He says, practice leadership, not reactionship. And so even in history, to practice leadership, not reactionship. And our job as leaders isn't just to react to what's happening, it's to lead people in light of what's happening. So as you think about what you're doing and how you're leading, are you leading people through this season and not just reacting? And because Ken Blanchard once said that leadership is not what you do to people, it's what you do with people. So practice leadership. Another thing that I've been learning, not just in history, but in context is, and today is embracing sacrifice, not selfishness. And we could all hear stories about the hoarding and all the stuff that's negative and yucky. But the truth of it is I need to remind myself that the early Christian church wasn't known for stockpiling ample food and supplies for themselves and spreading fear in the community. They freely gave to others. And during a time of crisis or whatever this is, embracing sacrifice, not selfishness. And I'm discovering too that the sacrifice I show as a leader will bring out the sacrifice in others. And a city, a community, an organization always takes on the characteristic of its leader. And I want, whether good, bad, or ugly, I want City Minister Network to look like me. I know there's yucky stuff about me, I know I'm a mess, but the truth of it is, if I can model what I want the rest of my team to practice and to be like, I think we're going to be okay. The third thing that I've been looking at is that wise counsel, gather around yourself wise counsel to check your natural instincts and engage them and ask them. Surround yourself with sharp people. Get on the phone, get on Zoom, whatever it is, and ask questions. Pick people's brains. What are they doing? What are they learning? How are they responding? You can always tell the quality of a leader by the kind of people that they surround themselves with. And I sure am so proud of our team, the incredible men and women that I get the privilege to surround myself with. But just like me, you want the smartest people around you, the most important people the smartest people and the most informed people around you. And if they're not around you in your immediate circle, then I want to encourage you to get them around you and start picking their brain and brainstorming. Another thing that's happened in history that I know I need to continue to learn is to communicate, and communicate clearly. And you keep saying it over and over and over again, because in the midst of dark times and tough times, it's really easy for people, and you and I included, to forget the hope that is in us. And Again, in history, people have faced tough times. They got through this. And I can't tell you what that's going to look like, but they got through it. And our intent and our hope, again, is that we come out of this stronger. And I'm confident that we're going to. Another thing that I've discovered in history and the story of other societies is to look, and they looked for opportunities in the midst of all their obstacles. And leaders find opportunity where others only see obstacles. So I want to encourage you to look for the opportunities. I don't like saying that publicly. I don't like saying, oh my gosh, this is a great opportunity, because it's so easy to be misconstrued and to minimize people's suffering and hurt. But leaders look for opportunities and they find opportunities. And so in the midst of all this, I want to encourage you, and I say this to myself, get your head up, look around. There are answers and there's hope and there's solutions laying around. You just have to get your head up and look ahead. Most of you are ready. They've done this in history as well, and most of you will do this, so I'll be real quick, but helping your city, helping your neighborhood, helping your community, get out of yourself and go find someone to love and to serve. We can't spend this time being obsessed with ourselves and our own struggle. And I say that saying as leaders in our community, because you all are leaders of leaders. There's almost 50 of us in the room, to broker hope and deepen trust going forward. We're going to get out of this. Again, don't know what that's going to look like, but we're going to come out of this in some way. And you and I, as leaders of leaders in this community, we're going to be the ones who set the emotional, cultural temperature in this community. We're the ones. And so it behooves us to broker hope and to deepen trust. And one way or another, this crisis is going to pass. And I want to say this to you, we have no time and we have no energy to be throwing rocks and criticizing or bitching about leaders or decisions. We have no time and we have no energy. I did say that word, sorry about that. So I want to tell you, we have no time or energy. Those times will come. I've already got the commitment, and we've already been told there will be time of reflection. There will be time of evaluation of how, as a county and leadership and organizations, we've all responded to this. There will be that time. But for now, broker hope and deepen trust. And that is a proven strategy for going forward into the future. So I just want to tell you that. And I want to give you two resources. Again, if you read or find YouTube or podcast, but again, as a history guy, looking as far back into the future as I can, so I can looking far back in the past so I can look into the future. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote a book called Leadership in Turbulent Times. And I found that book very interesting. It is how different presidents faced turbulent times and how they dealt with it through history. And then I mentioned one earlier to you, Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger. And you can get those books. You can listen to them online, but you can begin to look in the past and say, okay, how did other leaders address their issues? You can even go to Amazon or whatever bookstore you go to and start perusing. This is a time to be learning. This is a time to be gathering information going forward. So I want to challenge us as leaders to take this opportunity to maximize this difficult season. And the last thing, I'm just going to capture thought, is we tell you every time we get together, you are the precious gift to our community. It's you. And so I want to encourage you, please, like I'm sure the other speakers have today, and take care of yourself. Develop yourself, strengthen yourself. If you see me in my neighborhood, I'm practicing social distancing, but I'm walking every day and I'm trying to get some sweat and trying to get my blood going. So I want to encourage you to whatever that means for you, but you take care of yourself. So those are the things I want to say to you. We're going to get through this. Don't know what that looks like. We're going to get through it. And we're going to get through it because it's you and I as influencers of leaders who are going to move us forward. So I'm going to give you some announcements and then we're going to move you along. One thing, Aaron, I appreciated, social distancing is not the same as social isolation. So I appreciate that. I'm going to practice that. So let me give you some takeaways and some next steps. You've all been encouraged to schedule a time with somebody online, but reach out to somebody. I think Dave mentioned texting somebody and just showing your love and that you were thinking about them. So schedule a time and do that. There was a group of guys I heard about Tuesday morning. They had their coffee meeting around Zoom and they all had their coffee cups and solved all the problems of the world. And so I want to encourage you to get some friends and just do that. I think Maria mentioned our team. You just discovering this. We're going to do 15 minutes a day just to check in and share with one person, even this morning. Hey, I was on Catalyst, and here's one thought that came to my mind, and I just want to share that with you as well. We're going to be doing this, and haven't done this ever, but we're going to start regularly at the CMN Facebook page. I will be giving short thoughts and snippets and encouragement and information there. So we'll be launching that early next week and just keeping you there. So I hope that you signed up to CMN Facebook. I want to encourage all of you. A lot of you are nonprofit leaders, organizational leaders. You know this is a difficult time financially. City Ministry Network it continues to be like everybody else. And so I want to encourage you to give to CMN. But either way, if you have another organization, I saw Debbie Johnson on here, YFC, there's other nonprofits on here that, could use some financial support. So I want to encourage you to keep giving and keep supporting through this time. Next month, Mike mentioned earlier, but we're going to come back and revisit the local housing crisis. And we're going to share with you what progress has been made over the last year, because we launched something and we started probing with the county on how we could do better and how we could help people find homes. So Joe will do that with a panel of experts and give you an update on what's happened. We also are working already on June and some other ideas, and Lord willing, we will make those things happen. So, but I want to close this in prayer. I want to close this with a word of hope. You are the gift of God to our community. And so let's stay together. Let's do some of those practices, broker hope, and give the hope and building trust, because I tell you what, when this thing comes through, that's what's going to get us through. I've been through some of this already over the last couple of months with some other groups that we've been a part of. And through the difficult times, it was giving each other the benefit of the doubt because of our love and our trust of each other and our motives that got us through those tough times. So that's going to happen now. So I'm going to thank God for us. And then I'm going to hand it over to Mike and let him dismiss us. Lord, I thank you that you love our city, our county, our communities, our neighborhoods more than even we do. Thank you that this season does not take you by surprise. And it looks like in history, these seasons didn't take incredible men and women of leadership by surprise as well. So give each one in their season of social distancing and real encouragement. And also give them this season to learn new skills about what it means to connect and to build trust with others. Because Lord, even I know City Ministry Network, we want to connect people together so that they can build trust, so they can work together for the sake and the health of the well-being of everybody. So this will be a great city to grow up in and to grow old in. Thanks for your encouragement today for all those that are here. Just to be in the same room with them has been a real encouragement, emotional to me. In Christ's name, amen.